there's 300, perhaps 400 million of provisioning there for PPI mis-selling. Who was responsible for that?
I did refer to problems that arose from the Co-operative Bank, and I was referring in that case both to PPI and to the IT write-offs that arose. As far as the PPI provisions are concerned, which I think now approach 300 million, the bulk of that selling took place in the early 2000s. When I arrived in the bank in 2005, my discussion with the board was that the bank strategically was too dependent on unsecured lending and the associated incomes, which included PPI. And although PPI continued to be sold on my watch, the numbers are something like 37,000 in the first year, for which I was there half of, 20,000 the next year, 11,000 the year after that. So we very severely ramped it down. And in May 2007, we conducted some research because obviously there was a massive regulatory interest in PPI. We realised that there had been things to put right. We mailed 2,200 customers, 660 replied, and we found 9 cases out of that sample of inappropriate selling. So I don't believe on my watch there was systemic PPI mis-selling, and the numbers of cases that took place during my watch compared to the provisions lead me to think that it must have been significantly more historic. But I haven't seen the detail of those provisions because I haven't been in the bank for 4 years.
Have you asked the question how many of those cases which you reviewed at that time have subsequently been identified as possible cases for compensation?
I don't have any access to the bank to ask
what
that
we've
question
found is
now.
that the bank's view of what is deserving, I'm talking about the banks collectively, and the regulator's view often diverge about that dramatically, as we saw in the evidence we took from Lloyds, for example.
Yes, I think what is absolutely crystal clear is that even in those cases that we considered to be fine, there probably wasn't enough evidence retained to prove now that there was suitable advice given to the customer. But we had, under the new rules that came in 05, the COBS rules, we did choose to go an advised route. In 06, we removed the financial incentives for selling PPI from staff. And in 07, we introduced new ones that were based about service and customer care.
Are we, if we go hunting for it, going to find in the minutes statements by you making it clear that you wanted to bring PPI sales to an end, that you were worried about them, that you thought there was mis-selling?
No, you won't find statements that I thought they were mis-selling. In I think about 2007.
I'm just asking for something that supports the statement that you were running the sales down from the period that you
numbers,
took over in
the numbers that
2005.
I've just quoted are taken from the Co-op submission to the Parliamentary Commission on Banking Standards from October 2010, because I didn't have any access to those numbers from anywhere else, to be honest. So, not surprisingly, I was keen to try and find some evidence, and I found those numbers in that. There were board discussions about PPI. I can remember one elected member being particularly concerned about it. I also had it raised with me at a Co-op regional board meeting in Huddersfield that I attended. And personally, I was concerned. I was a newcomer to the organisation. I wanted to make sure we were doing it right. I specifically went into the call centre and listened to PPI calls.
So who was responsible for the PPI mis-selling, in your view, in the Co-op?
Well,
who was driving the policy?
The vast bulk of the unsecured lending in PPI was sold in the early 2000s before I arrived in the bank, so it's difficult for me to say who was responsible for it at that time. Obviously, ultimately the bank board, the CEO, were responsible.